Donna Summer's former home nestled in the Hollywood Hills, just off a winding road above Laurel Canyon. A Mediterranean-style villa with terracotta roofs, arched windows, and sweeping views of Los Angeles, surrounded by eucalyptus and cypress trees. Quiet, private, yet just close enough to the city's heartbeat to hear it pulsing at night. In early 2023, the house was quietly purchased by a couple from Chicago, Evan and Layla Carver. He was a film editor, mid-40s, who worked mostly from home. She was an art teacher, younger by 10 years, sensitive, intuitive. They weren't Donna Summer fans specifically, but they knew the property had a rich history. They were drawn more by the view, the charm, and the promise of a new life away from Midwest winters. Layla, upon their first visit, claimed the house smelled like lavender and smoke. The agent smiled, dismissing it. She didn't know that Donna Summer had once filled the home with incense and oils while recording in her private studio converted from the guest house behind the pool. The Carvers moved in on a calm May morning. Everything was normal at first: cleaning, decorating, boxes being unpacked. But Layla, left alone in the mornings while Evan worked in the soundproofed basement studio, began noticing strange details. Music playing faintly, even when the stereo was off. Old disco rhythms, barely audible, like echoes coming from behind the walls. A cold draft in the master bathroom at exactly 3:33 a.m. every night, followed by a scent of perfume she couldn't place. It was always strongest near the vanity mirror. And once, when Layla fell asleep in the sunroom, she swore she was awakened by someone humming softly, a tune she later identified as "Love to Love You Baby." Evan didn't experience anything at first. His days were filled with work and podcasts, but he did admit that the pool lights flickered on at night, even after he reset the circuit. It was the studio in the guest house that made things shift. Layla wanted to turn it into an art space, but every time she walked in, her chest tightened. The walls seemed to breathe. She tried setting up an easel one afternoon, but the air got heavy and humid, like a crowded nightclub. When she opened the windows, she heard the echo of voices laughing, distant, like a party fading into memory. One night, she discovered a cassette tape wedged behind a loose plank in the studio wall. It was unmarked. They found an old player at a thrift store and pressed play. There was no music, just ambient sounds. Footsteps, a match striking, a woman's breath, and then, faintly, Donna's voice sang, "I remember this house, this room, the way the city blinked at me through that window." Layla started dreaming of velvet couches, gold records, and a woman in silhouette at the piano, always silent, always turning her head away before vanishing. Evan changed too. He became obsessed with restoring the original layout of the house. He tore up the carpet in the hallway because it wasn't original. He began working late, and when Layla entered the studio to bring him coffee, he'd be staring at nothing, his screen black, whispering lyrics to songs he didn't even know. He claimed he started seeing Donna in his sleep, always looking concerned. Not angry, just worried, like something was unfinished. One night, he confessed that when he mixed his projects, some strange audio artifacts bled through. Vocals he hadn't added, whispers between the tracks. It came during a summer thunderstorm. The sky was purple, the city lit up like a heartbeat. Layla was painting in the sunroom when all the lights in the house went out, except the pool lights, which glowed turquoise, then blood red. She looked up and saw a figure in the water. A woman, floating. By the time Evan ran outside, the pool was empty. But the wet footprints led toward the guest house, and inside, every light bulb had burst. That night, Layla begged him to leave. But Evan, in a voice not quite his own, said, "She's still singing. You just have to listen." They moved out by the end of September. The listing agent never asked why. But she did note that the property now included a custom vintage recording space and had character and energy. As for the Carvers, they live in Oregon now. Layla no longer paints. Evan doesn't work with audio. They don't talk about the house. But Layla did once say in an interview for a local art magazine, "Some homes are filled with echoes, not of pain or violence but of performance. Some souls don't haunt to scare. They haunt to be remembered." Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. The Carvers left the property in early fall, but the house did not stay empty for long. By November, a new tenant signed a temporary lease, a woman in her mid-50s named Marcia Redfield. She was a music publicist from New York, semi-retired, soft-spoken, a widow. She had lost her husband 2 years prior to a heart attack, and the grief had weighed on her like a second skin. She came to Los Angeles in search of light and distance, craving silence and sunrises, something that reminded her of the years she wasn't yet lonely. She knew who Donna Summer was. Of course she did. She had worked with some of the same people decades earlier. But when the realtor showed her the villa and mentioned Donna's name, it was with the casual reverence of someone trying not to sound spooked. The house still carried the singer's energy in the best way. They added quickly, like an apology to the air. Marcia moved in on a chilly November afternoon. The sky above the canyon was washed with pink and silver. The hills smelled of dry grass and eucalyptus. The house stood proud but tired. The white stucco was fading, the bougainvillea half dead from a summer without attention. But it had presence, like an old woman in a fur coat. When Marcia stepped inside for the first time, the echo of her footsteps felt theatrical. As though someone had been waiting, she didn't unpack all at once. She brought few things with her: some books, a record player, framed photographs of her late husband in black and white, a collection of candles she never lit. The house had everything else: furniture, rugs, a kitchen preserved in time. She found an old set of linen napkins in the drawer, still pressed, smelling faintly of citrus. The wine glasses in the cabinet were tinted gold. She chose the second bedroom to sleep in, not the master. Something about the master felt too personal, like it didn't want to be touched. The door creaked too slowly. The mirror over the dresser tilted slightly to the right, no matter how often she straightened it. And the walk-in closet carried a smell sweet, powdery, something like aging rose petals mixed with vinyl. But she didn't think it was strange. Not yet. It began softly, with sound. Not loud, never startling. More like memory bleeding through the walls. She'd be making tea late at night and hear the high, faint flutter of a synthesizer. Notes with no origin, fading before she could place them. One evening, as she stood brushing her hair before bed, the floor beneath her shifted just slightly, as if someone had taken a heavy step across the hall. She stood perfectly still. There was no one else in the house. And then the smell came again, stronger than before. Incense, warm skin, hairspray, the perfume of backstage. She remembered it from years ago, when she was working at Capitol Records. That strange cocktail of glamour and exhaustion. The kind that lingers in dressing rooms after the show is long over. The music returned too, but now it came through the vents. Faint vocals. A woman's voice humming something low and longing. Something unpolished and private. The kind of sound you only make when no one is supposed to hear. Marcia turned off the heat, but the voice continued. She made her first visit to the guesthouse studio on a morning when the sun seemed too bright. Something about the main house had started to press in on her, as though the walls were no longer simply standing still but watching. The guesthouse was a short walk down a stone path, framed by overgrown jasmine. She hadn't stepped inside yet. Not once. The door was stiff but unlocked. She pushed it open and stepped into air that was 20 degrees warmer than the outside. Inside, heavy silence. And dust. Layers of it. The room had once been meticulously designed: acoustic panels along the walls, blacked-out windows, an old mixing console covered in a light tarp. Cables curled along the floor like sleeping snakes. In the corner, a red bulb hung from the ceiling, unlit. She pulled back the curtain. It was as if she'd cracked open a sealed memory. The light bulb flickered to life. There were no switches flipped, no power she could find. But the red glow grew steadily, bathing the room in a color so deep it seemed to pulse. And then came the breath. Soft, rhythmic, as if someone stood just behind her, breathing not from fear or fatigue, but from performance. As though a singer were building up to a note. She turned slowly, half expecting to see a shadow, a shimmer, something. There was nothing there, but the mixing board came to life. One by one, the green and yellow LED lights flicked on without touch, without command, just as if a track were being laid down. The meters danced up and down. No music played. Only silence, but active silence, like a room holding its breath. Then, faintly, like a whisper through headphones, "Play it again. I can feel it now." That night, Marcia sat at the vanity in the second bedroom. She hadn't used it before, too ornate for her tastes. But she felt drawn to it now. She sat looking into the mirror. First, only herself. Then, for a second longer than a blink, she swore she saw another woman standing just behind her left shoulder. Tall, hair pulled up, eyes closed, breathing in rhythm with hers, but not looking at her. The woman in the reflection was looking into the mirror straight ahead, as though she were waiting for her cue. Marcia spun around. Nothing. Just her dim bedroom, the open door, and the night pressing against the windows. Marcia didn't speak of the mirror, not even to herself. She had learned long ago not to name strange things too quickly. In the music industry, she'd watched artists unravel because of things they couldn't explain: anxiety, grief, shadows of old friends in hotel rooms. Some of them called it burnout. Others knew better. For a few days, she ignored the vanity, covered it with a bedsheet, let it fade into the corner like a piece of theater set left behind after the play closed. But something about that bedroom began to turn. It wasn't just the reflection anymore. It was the space, the way light bent in the morning, the way her phone battery dropped to zero while charging, the way certain words refused to be spoken aloud, like someone else in the room was already saying them under their breath. She began sleeping on the couch. Late one evening, while thumbing through old vinyl records she'd brought with her, Aretha, Shaka, Dusty Springfield, Marcia's cell phone rang. It wasn't a number she recognized. The screen displayed simply unknown. She hesitated, then answered. There was nothing for a moment, just a faint hum. Then, music, just a chord progression, something warm and analog, maybe electric piano. It was familiar. And then a woman's voice, low, hesitant, whispering like she was backstage before stepping into a spotlight. "You ever miss the crowd before it's even gone?" Marcia didn't respond. Couldn't. Click. The line went dead. She stared at the phone. No record of the call. No incoming log. Just silence now, thick and real. She placed the phone on the record shelf and left it there for the rest of the night. The next day, she found it in the studio. It was a chunky, dust-covered cassette deck, late 70s era, tucked beneath the mixing console. She hadn't noticed it during her first visit. It had been hidden behind a wooden stool. The tape inside was unlabeled, just like the one the Carvers had found before they fled the house. The moment she pressed play, the room seemed to drop in temperature. At first, room noise, a mic being adjusted, the creak of a stool, then breathing, then silence, then a voice. Donna's, not singing, speaking. "This room remembers. Don't let it go dark. Don't let the silence take it." The tape cut off there. The spool spun but produced only static. Marcia sat still for what felt like an hour, heart pinned in place. She wasn't frightened, but she wasn't alone. It was just after 4 a.m. when Marcia woke up gasping. She couldn't explain why. No dream, no noise, just the sense of something having passed through her. A tremor. She stood barefoot in the kitchen, poured a glass of water. The city lights blinked below. The canyon was cloaked in night mist. Something drew her to the back patio, the quiet hum of crickets, the soft drip of dew from the trees. The pool shimmered. There was a woman standing at the edge. From the back, she was tall, elegant. Her arms were at her sides. Her hair was up. She was barefoot, dressed in something sheer, something theatrical, like a robe someone would wear just before a performance. The woman turned, but slowly. Marcia didn't move, didn't speak. The figure's face was soft, tired, and beautiful eyes that carried decades, a mouth poised between song and sorrow. But then she vanished, not like a light turning off, but like a note fading to silence. Gone before the echo could catch her. Marcia stood at the sliding glass door for almost 10 minutes before returning to the couch. She didn't sleep. She didn't even sit. She just stared at the wall, letting the hours stretch until the sun began to rise. Marcia began writing music again. She hadn't composed in years, not since her husband's death. But something in the studio made her fingers move. She sat at the keyboard each morning, and melodies flowed out like memories that didn't belong to her. Smoky chords, vintage rhythms, little fragments that felt lifted from old jam sessions. Sometimes she'd hum along with them, unsure if the tune was hers, or if she was only repeating something she'd once heard. One afternoon, while adjusting levels on the mixing board, she found a hidden reel-to-reel tape labeled only 8th take unfinished. She played it. The track was raw, a slow, sultry groove. The voice on it was unmistakable Donna Summer, singing softly, as if experimenting, building something new. It was unlike her released work, more vulnerable, less polished, but hauntingly intimate. At the end, there was a brief laugh, hers, and then the words, "I don't think this one ever left the house." Marcia copied the file. She didn't know why. Maybe for preservation. Maybe for permission. She began hearing footsteps around 2 a.m. They moved through the hallway, not hurried, not dragging, just steady, purposeful. Sometimes she'd hear humming behind the bathroom door. Other times, the faint click of heels against tile. The mirrors fogged up without water running. A music stand in the guest house tipped over for no reason. The red light bulb began flickering again once, just for a second, during a thunderstorm that cracked the hilltop sky open like a drumbeat. And once, when Marcia looked through the windows toward the city, she saw dozens of tiny blue lights flicker in the yard, like applause. It lasted just long enough for her to whisper, "I hear you." By December, the days grew shorter, and the house seemed to settle deeper into itself, like it was remembering what it used to be. Marcia no longer tried to explain the things she experienced. She had surrendered to them, in a quiet, reverent way. She stopped questioning the shifting shadows in the hallway. She stopped checking the thermostat when the studio dipped in temperature. She simply accepted the strange patterns of the house, as if she had taken a job with no title, keeper of memory, perhaps, or curator of echoes. She knew now the house wasn't haunted in the traditional sense. There were no violent outbursts, no slamming doors, no cold hands on her shoulders. What lived here was something else, something unfinished, a melody that had never reached its final note. One overcast morning, Marcia sat cross-legged in the center of the guesthouse studio, surrounded by tape boxes and old lyric sheets that had fallen from a false bottom drawer. Most were scribbled in faint ink, written in long, looping cursive. Notes about tempo, chord changes, fragments of lyrics. When the lights go down, will they remember the girl behind the voice? This beat has a heartbeat. Don't kill it with polish. Among the boxes, she found a reel labeled, DS Keep Private, Studio Only, 1983. She threaded it into the deck with careful hands. The tape hissed. Then, "This is Donna." A pause. Just me. No audience. No engineers. No disco ball. Just this little hill and the moonlight. Her voice was quiet, thoughtful. "I've been thinking maybe when I'm gone, this place will still be humming. Maybe someone will sit where I'm sitting and feel it, this rhythm that won't quit. It's not mine. Not really. I just carry it." Then came a song, unfinished, raw, unreleased. Just piano and voice. No beat. A ballad that rose like steam from pavement. About aging. About love after fame. About wanting to be remembered not for how loud she sang, but for how real she had been in silence. The tape ended with her whispering, "Leave the mic on." That night, the sky broke open with the kind of storm that rarely touched Los Angeles. Thunder rolled in like 1,000 drums. Lightning flashed over the canyon like stage lights. The power went out. Marcia lit a single candle. She walked barefoot across the cold tile floor, through the darkened house, to the studio. The red light bulb above the console blinked once, then again, and turned solid, casting a warm glow across the room. No power, no explanation. Just light. The speakers clicked on. Without touching anything, the piano track from the final tape began playing. Slowly, softly. Then the voice joined. Not from the tape this time. It came from somewhere deeper in the house. or maybe above, or beneath. The voice was singing live. It was Donna's voice, but not a recording. Breathy, vibrant, deliberate, as if she were in the next room, finally finishing the song. Marcia stood there, frozen, tears in her eyes, not out of fear, but reverence. The studio air shimmered like heat off asphalt. The candles flickered to the rhythm. The sound surrounded her. It wasn't loud, but it was full, the kind of sound that fills a theater and your chest at the same time. And then, a second voice joined in, softer, uncertain, older. Marcia's. She didn't remember singing, but her voice was there, weaving in harmony, closing the phrase. And in that moment, the red light above her slowly dimmed until the room returned to darkness. The next morning, the power returned. The house was still. Marcia began packing. She didn't wait for the lease to end. She didn't feel driven out. There was no fear. Only a sense that the performance was complete. The curtain had closed. Before leaving, she returned to the vanity in the master bedroom. She removed the bedsheet, wiped the dust from the glass, and looked at herself, older now, softer around the eyes, but more present than she'd ever been. For a flicker of a second, she saw another woman behind her. A smile, then gone. She placed a vinyl copy of 4 Seasons of Love on the center of the vanity and whispered, "Thank you for letting me listen." The house was put up for sale again, but this time with no urgency. The listing stayed quiet, private. A few buyers visited, but none stayed longer than a walkthrough. Some said the house felt too alive. Others simply looked around, paused, and shook their heads like they'd walked into a memory they couldn't place. The studio remains intact. The red light bulb is still there. And every now and then, on warm nights when the wind dips low through the canyon, neighbors report faint music drifting through the trees. Not a full song, just a note, held, suspended, waiting for someone to finish it. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story.